In over 10 years of testing bikes, never have I gotten the weird looks or questions I've gotten when it came time to hit the trail with the BeMoreBikes Raised Reverse Stem. And to be honest, it is the most interesting, strange, and exciting product I think I've maybe tested in recent memory. So today we're going to talk about all the craziness that has happened while riding the BeMoreBikes Raised Reverse Stem. So some of you may remember from Instagram last year, we posted a clip of us walking around Sea Otter where we actually bumped into Bronson Moore, and he was riding around with one of these stems and a big t-shirt that said, "Ask me about my stem." And ask him we did. He had a very passionate and informational response about the pros and the reasons that he came to market with this new stem. So for those of you who are trying to think of a long list of excuses and reasons and examples why this stem won't work, Bronson has, I think, every one of those questions or statements answered with his reason and his logic and philosophies behind it. Now, they may not be true for you and they may not be fact, but at least if you go to his website, you'll see that he has put a lot of time and thought and energy into presenting good quality information, supporting his opinion on why this stem is correct. Whether or not they felt they were true or we felt they were benefits all around for us, we'll get into later. But first, let's just briefly highlight this stem, what it's made out of, and what the features are. It does require a little bit longer of a steer tube length. I believe 60 millimeter steer tube length is what you're gonna need at minimum. We obviously put ours as low as possible, so we kind of offset, not do like a massive change in our cockpit height. Well, a less massive change in cockpit height. But it is CNC machined in California out of 7075 T6 air grade aluminum. So aside from this massive height, one of the other most notable features about the stem is that your hands are actually backwards instead of in front of that steer tube. And that was definitely something that we had some issues and concerns with. On Bronson's rather extensive answers to concerns and questions from people, he says, if you look at motorcycles, just about every motorcycle is going to have your hands behind the steering axis. So that kind of got us thinking a little bit of tradition, why stems have always been going forward. You know, brands like Mondraker and, you know, way back have experimented with 0 millimeter stem lengths. And, you know, even if the performance isn't gonna sell us on making the swap, it has definitely made us question tradition and bike setup moving into the future. So with that said, let's get into the performance and our test period. So this is, I would say, more of a downhill focused product. The first time I took this stem out was on the new Fezzari Timp Peak. This was a bike that I had ridden in Utah when we did the Dissected to kind of help launch this bike. However, I hadn't yet ridden it here on our home trails on one of my most commonly ridden test tracks. So it was a brand new bike and I put this stem on it, hadn't set it up, hadn't got the bike dialed or ridden anything, right? So it was a brand new bike. I set it up the way it was in Utah and came out to my test track. And I got, not only did I set a personal record, but I set a KOM on the trail on ride number 1. So I guess that could be a testament to this bike and it being awesome, but I also think that there's no denying that the stem had some benefits in this ride. Now don't check out, don't say that I'm telling you to go spend money on this $400 stem yet, because there are some huge drawbacks for me personally. We've also been talking with Seth over at Burn Peak, who texted us that he just got one of these after seeing ours was getting tested, and we've had some conversations at length about performance and pros and cons, and there are some cons. Bronson claims that this will help your riding in any way possible. I'm a bit of a skeptic, and I feel like it's impossible to gain benefit in one place without losing or having a drawback in another, and this stem is, to me, a great example of that. When you are attacking very steep bits of trail, the fact that you are so upright and tall undeniably gives you more confidence. It makes the trail seem way flatter, way calmer. And if you imagine, you know, being on a bike, you know, when stuff gets steep and the front end dips and the farther down your head goes, the steeper your brain is telling you it is, the more timid, fearful, hesitant you get, right? It's self-preservation, pure and simple. If you're riding down something like this, you're alert, you're aware this is steep, this is scary. If you're going down something like this, you don't think it's that bad. You're okay to stay off the brakes, you're okay to attack, you feel confident, you're feeling control. You're not just in a controlled dive going to the earth. This stem makes you feel that way. Like, I don't care what it looks like, that's just a fact. And it's crazy, and it helped me lay down a very fast time over and over again. Now, climbing. Yes, it does put you in a much more upright position. I think I was engaging my core a lot more. I found myself relaxing a lot on mellower climbs. When it started to get really steep, I found myself just kind of, rather than like leaning over on the bars and using, you know, the shoulders and arms to support me, I was using my core to engage and lean over. So, you know, I got a little bit more of a core workout, but I didn't have a huge problem keeping the front tire on the ground until I was really hitting steep climbs with like rocks or roots that would want to lift the tire more. Where I was having some deal-breaking issues with the stem in the climbing was tight switchback turns on steep climbs. So like, and not even switchbacks, but just any sort of a tight turn if you're trying to, you know, weave through rocks or roots or whatever it might be. You know, the stem is back and it's high, but when I would go to turn the bar, like if you look at this length right here, you know, your femur is longer than this. And I was turning the bars while climbing and hitting the underside of the bar with the front of my thigh, which wasn't something that was happening when the stem was lower and way out in front. For downhill, it has an application. Technical climbing, I think, which, you know, a lot of people do, it's, for me, is a deal breaker just because I'm hitting my legs and I don't have that maneuverability to get the bike where I want to go. I also noticed at slower speeds, just dipping the bike over, like doing little like S turns where you're kind of just playing around in a parking lot. You might have like kind of flatter trails where you're really trying to weave back and forth through rocks. I felt like that higher center of gravity made the bike feel like it wouldn't go, and then all of a sudden it would want to fall over and tip really aggressively, rather than having a little bit more of a controlled dip or lean over. And I could attribute that, I guess, to a higher center of gravity not being so easy and just wanting to fall over once it does. Once you're up at speed and riding harder, more aggressive, or, you know, your speeds are up over that 8 to 10 mile an hour spot, I didn't really notice that or have the issue. I was very surprised at how I was still able to weight that front wheel when I needed it. I think I let out about 5 PSI out of the fork, added about 7 or 8 to the shock, just to sort of change my weight distribution on the descent. So there was a very little amount of suspension play that was pretty quick and easy. The suspension didn't change quite as much as I thought it would. Obviously, a little more rear shifted, weight biased, but the climbing and the technical climbing were definitely, for me and what I like to ride, they were deal breakers. When I went back to a normal stem, I noticed how much more timid, steep, and weird I felt being so tucked over and so bent over the front. And I think that is what my big takeaway from this is. Even if this isn't the right stem for you, and it wasn't the right stem for me, it is having me question what length stem and how tall of a rise I want on my bars. Traditionally, I've liked a pretty low bar. I've just liked to be low and in that attack position, right? And leaning over that front end. But I'm seeing the gains in the confidence and the calmness and the strength of my position with a higher bar. And I really think I'm gonna start running a taller, you know, taller bar height and a shorter stem if possible. And I think maybe in the future, this might be a little bit extreme, but there might start being a resurgence of zero length stems that riders might really start enjoying. I really had my mind changed about some of the handling performance benefits and what this did for me on the trail. It's not perfect. There are some definite drawbacks, like I said, but at the same time, if those aren't drawbacks or issues that you have, if you want that confidence, you want a tall position, you ride a lot of really steep, gnarly downhill stuff, and you just have like kind of fire roady climbs to get back up without a lot of tight, techie turns, you might want to try this thing out. Like, it's really impressive what it does on the downhills. If nothing else, maybe check out a really short stem and a high-rise bar and give that a try. You might be impressed with how different it is than what your mind is telling you, because it definitely changed my perspective, and I've given it to a few other guys to ride, and they've all come back like shaking their heads thinking, I didn't expect that out of this stem, right? It's goofy, it's weird, it's tall, but there are some very real benefits along with the drawbacks. So thank you guys very much for watching the show. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Please subscribe to the channel if you don't already. Ask any questions down below. Bronson always loves having conversations. I'm sure he'll chime in and reply with you guys. Go check out his website, reach out, ask him a question, and let's see, maybe if that stem was half as high and didn't have that reverse, would you guys be interested, or is this just a straight up no? Let us know down below. Thank you guys again, and we'll see you out on the trails.